Hey everyone, welcome to Rants, the solo pod. I am Ryan Alexander back here with you for another episode of Ryan Rants. A little under the weather this week, mostly last week, but I will try to power through this. So hopefully I don't lose my voice. But big week. It's always a big week. Something's always going on in Pirates Nation, Pirates Twitter. What news did we have? So we have the draft coming up. Who are the Pirates going to take? Dylan Cruz or Paul Skeens, and of course everybody has an opinion. Cruz apparently doesn't want to play for the Pirates. Go figure, says he won't sign. I'm not going to get into that today. We're a little bit off from the draft, and then trade deadline. Everyone's talking about mostly John Paul Morosi, or now he just goes by John Morosi. I don't know. He keeps dropping and adding his middle name, but he's saying that the Pirates teams are calling on Kutch, and the Pirates should also talk Mitch Keller. So, that's a lot going on there. I will say this, I'm not going to get into the trade deadline talk at this point or talk about Kutch, but if you trade Kutch at the deadline, he better be 150% on board. Like almost he has to request it. And then hopefully he's cool with talking to you in the off season about coming back, but he has to absolutely be on board. But I'm not going to talk about that today. We have a little bit of time until the trade deadline to see where this team goes. But we're going to talk a little Ben Cherington in this front office regime, which has, I think, wore out its welcome with most of Pirates Twitter and Pirates fan, Pirate Nation. Ben was hired back in November 2019. This is his fourth season as the Pirates GM. And we're seeing, from the Pirates' most recent losing streak and pretty much everybody in the lineup's hitting slump, that the Pirates are, quickly falling to the bottom of the division again. Not really looking like they're going to compete after all in 2023. And even after their 20-8 start, which just imagine if they hadn't overachieved in April, where would they be? But my question with Ben is, and this is for everybody, you can DM me, message me on Twitter, message North Shore 9, whatever. How much longer are you willing to sit back and see Ben Cherington be the GM with basically the same results here, nothing happening? We're 4 years in, and the Pirates, there's really nothing to show for it. I think as far as timeline, if this year continues on the projection that it's headed, and next year we don't see any tangible progress or improvement with the major league team, with prospects overall, I think that's when you have to pull the plug. I think basically if next year is very similar to this year, where the Pirates are just kind of scuffling, not really making any improvement or progress, you have to pull the plug on it. There's apparently a following on Twitter. Alan Saunders and I got into a spat this week on Twitter about this in general, but apparently there's people that are just fine with letting Ben just go on for a couple more years, several years, another 4 or 5 years. I don't know. But at some point, you have to have in my eyes, you have to have some sort of progress to show for it. So I don't know what Ben has shown at this point. The team clearly tanked the first couple years. They got fortunate with the 2020 COVID season that was a shortened season, only 60 games. They were the worst team by far, 19-41, got the first overall pick, and then 2 100 lost seasons from there. They'll be picking first this next month here in this draft. Um, but at some point, like, and I was all fine with the tank. Like, the Pirates should have tanked. They had to tank, really, excuse me, to get these top draft picks. But it's that point now where I think the prospect building part, besides this upcoming draft, is over. You need to start adding improvement and major league players to this roster that are going to, compete, move this team into the next level. And I just haven't seen that. And I think the red flags have kind of always been there, even back to the start with this regime. You look back at basically every trade that Cherington did, going back to, you know, um, Tyone and Marte. They were all just the returns on all these trades all came back where they were underwhelming. The Tyone trade was the one that looked like it was pretty much going to be great with Contreras, and now we've seen what Contreras ended up doing this year, and he's basically in the bullpen now, and hopefully he turns out and maybe he can still be that rotation starter. But that was the one deal where the return actually looked pretty good. The rest of them were pretty much all underwhelming in my eyes. Um, and I don't think this is all subjective here. I mean, look at the Marte trade. They trade Marte for Brennan Malone and Peguero, which Peguero is on the cusp. Hopefully, he'll be coming up, and we'll still see what he has to offer. But he kind of stalled out in the minors as well until recently this year when he really came on. But we traded Marte with years of control for that return. The Marlins turned around and traded Marte at the deadline to the A's for Jesus Luzardo, who's like one of the Marlins' top mid-rotation arms at this point. He's been solid for 2 to 3 years now. So, like, just look at that trade alone. Like, that's pretty objective there that the Pirates just didn't do as good in trading Marte and the return that another team get. That's pretty objective. And I just felt like across the board with his trades, it's been that way since day one. So that was a big question mark. Definitely you had the prospect numbers where the Pirates were, in the top 100, and you saw the, Baseball America rankings and MLB Pipeline and stuff where their system and the depth and everything definitely went up and increased because it's true. There wasn't much to work with. Cherington came in, there wasn't much to work with, especially in the minor league system. They had some major league players to trade, and they did that. But yeah, I question the return on a lot of it. And then you look at the prospects in general, the drafts. I think the drafts have. I mean, you picked first. You took Henry Davis. Davis is now up. We're finally seeing what he can do. But at this point, whether you point to the Pirates mis-scouted him or they just didn't develop his catching game, basically at this point they're content with having him play right field and DH. So basically, you drafted a right field DH hitter at 1-1. And, short of him being Edgar Martinez in the DH position, and a Hall of Fame type hitter, then you really you shouldn't be taking that player 1-1. Is he that type of hitter? I mean, that's a lot to ask for, but I guess we'll find out. But just kind of knowing the Pirates' luck, it probably won't work out. But I mean, I think one of the main reasons when they took Davis, which was a little bit of a shock at that time, was okay. Well, they must feel he's a catcher. He can be that top catcher, be a good hitter as well. Well, they pretty much at this point he's come up and he's only DH'd in right field. They're still carrying 2 catchers. Like at this point, it doesn't even look like they have any plans of him catching. So again, you took a right fielder DH at 1-1. I mean, it's kind of absurd. And whether they had the idea of him catching and, like I said, they mis-scouted him or they just didn't develop it well enough, that's on them. We don't know what happened behind the scenes, but we see what the final results are when they come up, and it hasn't been good. It hasn't been great. Not saying Davis has been fine as far as the bat goes, but it's very early on. We'll see. But it's just everything seems underwhelming with this front office, and that's where I'm at. And it just, when people like Allen and just some of the media or some of the other people on Twitter they almost get like mad at the fan base for showing anger at this front office. And it's like, what do you expect? I mean, this is year 4. And well, they didn't plan on competing this year. Well, maybe they should have. I mean, they did spend 40-50 million dollars in the offseason, not just to bring in junk. I mean, they brought in Kutch, they brought in Rich Hill, they brought in Santana, Choi, um, Austin Hedges, which just, oh my God, can we get rid of that experiment? But they added people in the offseason. It just really hasn't worked. And whether you tried to compete or not, it's that time now that you should be trying to compete. So I'm at this point now where how much more are we willing to see Cherington? How much more are we willing to see this front office? Whether you feel like they did okay with the trades, they need to do better drafting, maybe it's better developing. It's really tough to know because we don't see the behind the scenes of that development and everything. We just see the end results. And at this point, it hasn't been good enough. I mean, look at three teams out there, and I'm not even going to bring up the Reds because the Reds I don't believe are for real, even though that's what Bob Nightingale says. Look at the Orioles, Rangers, and D-backs. Those are three teams that didn't have a great team when they decided to kind of tear down and rebuild at the same time. Within 3-4 years, all three of those teams are winning. Rangers, D-backs are in first place this year. Orioles are 20 games over 500. They were winning last year. They had a winning record last year. Like, these teams have proven, and like Texas didn't really like tank. I mean, the D-backs and Orioles, kind of did. But like the Rangers didn't have like top pick after top pick after top pick like the Pirates pretty much are. So, and all three of them are winning. So all three of those teams have proven that you can turn things around in under 4 or 5 years. And it's not like Texas and Arizona and the Orioles tore down some, team that went to the ALCS or something and didn't get to the World Series and they had to tear it down like the Stars and Scrubs model, and they had pieces to trade. They didn't really have much either, along with the Pirates. So here we are. All three of those teams are doing well. The Reds are doing well, which I didn't even know what you would call the last Reds rebuild because they started like before that rebuild even like got finished, they started like trading more pieces. So like I feel like the Reds kind of lapped you. Even the Cubs. I mean, we saw the Cubs go from World Series winner to kind of hanging on. Then they finally made some moves, tore it down, and now they're ahead of you in the standings. They caught up. So while the Cubs or Reds might not be a playoff team this year or whatnot, especially in this awful division, are they really a playoff team in like normal baseball, environment? But those teams lapped you. And then the Orioles, Rangers, and D-backs are doing a lot better than you are. Like they're actually winning. I said this about Derek Shelton too, basically 10 days into Cherington's regime here and back in 2019, he hired Derek Shelton as his manager. And I said this on Twitter like a week or so ago. What has Derek Shelton done in 4 years? What has he done well at? What's one aspect that Derek Shelton has done great in? I can't think of one. Somebody said, well, the players like him. I mean, that's great. Like, third graders like their third grade teachers sometimes. That's great. Like, what have they done? What has he done? What's the aspect that, and I get it, like, my apologies. Oh my goodness. I get it. He has the team hasn't been good. He's had not much to work with. They've pretty much been in a tank for the past 3-4 years. But you should be able to point to your manager and say, this is what he does well. He motivates the team, or he does good managing the bullpen, or gets the right hitting coach and pitching coach, and they get more out of the players than you would expect out of this talent. Really hasn't done that. I haven't seen that at all. So especially not with the bullpen aspect, which again, Cherington hasn't given him much to work with. So that's why I'm not screaming for Shelton to necessarily be fired. But at some point, this regime, I'm more on the Cherington front office end of it, you need to go. And it's just, I mean, I don't know why people want to keep hanging on. Why delay it? If this rebuild's not going to work, and it likely isn't going to work, just going off of the The facts that, the prospects really haven't panned out have been too great that have come up. The trades have been questionable in general. The free agent signings, like it just everything across the boards, nothing is really working. Um, Look at this in the past 4 years. We had the 10-game losing streak this year. We had another 10-game losing streak 2 years ago. They also had one 9-game losing streak and three 8-game losing streaks. And one of those came in the COVID year that was only 60 games. So you have six losing streaks of 8 games or more, two 10 games, and one 9-game losing streak. And that's what Shelton and Cherington has given us. You got to do more. I mean, you got to do more. And I don't understand the you got to give them several more years, and it probably won't work out, but you can't tear it down. Why can't you tear it down? You don't even necessarily have to tear it down. I think there's a big disconnect with the narrative that if you fire your GM and your front office, that the new one's got to come in and just totally clean house and get new players and just completely tear it down to the point where you have a $30 million payroll and they're going to try it all again with their prospects. I don't think that necessarily has to be the case. I mean, the Pirates are going to have the first pick this year, so you got to think they're going to have Dylan Cruz or Skeens, like either an ace pitcher or what they're saying, like one of the top, kind of Bryce Harper type hitters that we've seen in a while. So, like, that's a good start. You have Terramar Johnson from last year. You have some guys there. Like, I don't think it needs to be a complete teardown. But, I mean, look at the Penguins. The Penguins hired a new GM this past year. They haven't talked anything about a teardown. Are they going to trade, Crosby, Malkin, and Letang and all them and just completely tear down? Probably not. They're going to try to build around that. And I think that's something that maybe needs to happen here next year. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be a complete teardown, but just if you know the process is wrong and you don't trust the guy that's in charge of doing it right now, why would you keep rolling with them? I mean, why keep going that route when you already kind of know? I apologize for the wheezing that I'm doing here. Hopefully it isn't showing up on the mic. But yeah, why continue down that process? It just if you know that's not where it's not working, which it hasn't, cut bait, move on, get somebody else. And I think if this year continues along where we've seen it, 6, 7 games under, and they get worse, hitting slumps throughout most, here and there throughout the season, more so than is normal. And then next year, we see a bit of the same thing, kind of just mid-tier signings in the offseason that don't really work out or pan out. No improvement or very little progress from the prospects, and just the team in general. Wins and losses on the field. If you don't see that next year, I think you have to get rid of them. And I really don't think. Let me know, what you think as far as how many more years Cherington, should have. But I really don't see where any. I don't understand the argument to keep him more than one more season. Next year is year 5. What are we waiting on? And what are we waiting on at this point? You should have been able to show us progress on the major league field by now. We have 3 teams that have done it, all more recent than you have. And next year is going to be year 5, and we'll probably still be here yelling about the same thing, fighting on Twitter, going around and around about this. But at the end of the day, you just have to be better. You have to be better. And, Cherington, Shelton, I pretty much, they've worn out their welcome here, for me. And everyone says, well, wait till 2024. They weren't supposed to be good this year. Well, that's great. I mean, you tanked 3 years. You got 3 top, draft picks. What do you need, 2 more? Like, when are you planning on competing? When's that ending? Like, at some point, it's got to end. So if it doesn't happen next year, I really hope everybody's going to be on board for moving on, because why waste another 2-3 years with the guy that doesn't have it, and go from there. So that's my shtick with Ben Cherington. I'm pretty much over it, and yeah, it's just time to move on. But I don't know. We'll see what the Pirates do this week. We'll get into more. The trade deadline's coming up. It's going to be very interesting to see what the Pirates do here at this deadline as far as McCutchen. Rich Hill and those guys, you can trade. They're on 1-year contracts. Like I said, Kutch also on a 1-year deal, but you almost have to. He has to be on board. Absolutely has to be on board to trade him. There's just a lot more going on there than just you signed an older guy in his mid to late 30s to a 1-year deal. There's too much loyalty there and everything. They've traded him before, so we'll see. But if you trade him, he's got to be on board, and hopefully he's maybe interested in coming back for next year, because he's already said he doesn't want to play anywhere else, wants to finish with the Pirates, and da-da-da-da. So maybe he'll be done after this year regardless, but I don't know. Kutch is playing some good ball, so I kind of doubt that. But like, if he comes to you and says, hey, I want to try to win a ring, I'm still open in the offseason to coming back if I want to play next year, then yeah, go make a trade. Go try to improve your team right now or for next year. But man, it's going to be, could you imagine Twitter on that day? But then you get into Bednar, and Morosi threw around Keller today. I don't see the need to trade Keller at all. Like, again, you listen on everybody, but unless you're blown away, forget it. Bednar, he's great, obviously, but he's a closer. So if you can get somebody to overpay and pull in a hitter or somebody that may be an everyday ball player for the next 5-6 years with the team, then yeah, you listen on Bednar. But I just can't imagine Keller. And let's say the Pirates draft Skeens and they got him and Keller for the next foreseeable future. I mean, that's a start right there in the rotation that you can go off of, especially for the Pirates. So you finally found a guy that's like a top of the rotation guy that you developed, you drafted, and you actually developed after a lot of hurdles and struggles and missteps. Keller has appeared to have made it. Why would you go and trade him? Again, if you're blown away, that's one thing. But so anyway, we'll get there. We'll get there with the trade deadline. We'll see what this team does in the next couple of weeks, and go from there. But yeah, where are you at with Ben Cherington? How much longer do you want to see him in the front office in here, making underwhelming trades? And that's the other thing. Even if they trade Kutch, like we said, if they trade Keller, I don't trust Ben Cherington to make that trade, to pull in the maximum, oh God, I can't talk now. The max value in that deal, in a Keller type deal. I don't even trust them to do it. So if I don't trust you to make a trade to better the team in the near future, why do I still want you here? We can get a new GM to pick up the mess that he left off and not necessarily tear it down, not making another 6-year rebuild. Look at the Orioles, Rangers, and D-backs. They've done it in less. So, yeah, it's just, that's where I'm at. All right, guys, follow the North Shore 9. I'm at Rounder829. Follow the boys, Donardo, Jim, Tyler, Cody. I guess Neil and Doug, too, if you want to. All right, guys, take it easy. I'll see you later. Peace. And here's Jim's stupid face.
Hey, you all. Thank you for watching. I know we try to provide the most entertaining content that we can, and we'd love to spread it to as many people as possible. So I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but if you could take the 5 seconds to like this video and subscribe to the page, it helps out so much more than you know. Thank you, and let's go Bucks.